Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and round and round.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Maggie.
How's your new, I don't even know what I was going to call it, early retired life, but just your new life. How's it going?
New life has been good. I've definitely been keeping busy. Been working at the bike shop doing bike fits, coaching. I got another coaching client a couple weeks ago, so I'm up to 11 coaching clients now.
I like seeing your posts online where one of your coaching clients wins a race or places in a race, and that's cool, you know?
That is extremely satisfying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, what's funny is you and Erica, who are currently, no longer working demanding jobs, are the hardest to schedule with. Liz, who has a job, is the easiest to schedule with. It's funny how that works. Okay. I think it's more that we're all off living, we're away from our computers a lot, which I've noticed makes me much harder to pin down than when I was sitting at a desk all day.
And I, remind you that I am still training 20 plus hours a week. I did, a couple 25-hour weeks the last couple weeks, so.
That's fair. I shouldn't even say you're fun employed, or you're basically a professional cyclist.
Correct. Yes. I'm definitely training like a pro right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. To anyone who might be new here, welcome to Inside Out Money. This is a personal finance podcast focused on redefining wealth from the inside out. Every week, I speak with a rotating set of co-hosts about a different financial topic to help you improve your financial mindset and tactics. Today, we have co-host Andrew here, and we're going to do a listener Q&A episode. We got a lot of good questions in.
These are always fun.
Yeah, hopefully we got some good answers here, too. Before we dive in, though, because we are going to be giving
personal opinions
and thoughts on financial-related questions, a very quick disclaimer. We are just two people, Maggie and Andrew, with microphones. We do not have a crystal ball. We're not financial wizards. Even if we did have some sort of formal certifications, wouldn't matter. The information we are sharing here is for entertainment and discussion only. It should not be taken as financial advice. This is your money, your choices. Your financial situation is unique to you. And look, we're answering things on a 1 or 2 sentence question. We don't know your whole financial background and everything else. And so you personally are solely responsible for your financial decisions. So always do your own research and consult with a qualified professional before making any financial choices. Basically, we're just here to chat, not manage your portfolio. And we don't even know everything we would need to know to do that. But we're going to get into some Q&A.
Sounds great.
I love the disclaimer. It's always don't listen to us. But here we go. We're about to talk anyways.
Yep.
Okay. So here's the first question. Okay. I love that it started with, this may be something I just need to Google myself. But when calculating my retirement number, is that in today's money, or do I need to adjust for future inflation? That's from Ken's.
So for this one, I always like doing the comparison in today's money because that is my frame of reference for what things cost today. So a lot of the financial software tools, Projection Lab is what I use, has a really simple toggle where it just says you can look at it in today's dollars, you can look at it in future dollars, but I always keep it on today's dollars because when you start looking at future dollars, the numbers get huge and it's just hard to comprehend what the costs of what that means in today's, right?
It's funny, my mom and I were just texting earlier, and she was telling me how much money her mom made in her her mom was a teacher, and she told me her mom's final salary was $15,000, and that was in 1978. And so I did some quick Googling and discovered that's about $75,000 today. You know, that $15,000 in 1978 is about similar to like $74,000 today. And then I guess her first salary, my mom's first salary, was $5,000 a year in 1970. And that is about $41,000 a year, which tracks. But it's just interesting to, yeah, you're right. You wouldn't necessarily, like, my grandmother wouldn't have been able to deal with that $74,000 number and been like, hey, this number, did you know in, 50 years or whatever, this is going to be worth, like, it's hard to calculate or think about. The other thing I would say is I used to always just go off the simple math of times 25, right? The 4% rule. And that calculates in inflation, right? Part of that, the theory of that number and that rule already builds in for inflation. So you're dealing with today's number times 25.
Just one more thought on that. If you are comparing in today's dollars, when you're thinking about your investment returns, it needs to be a net return. So if you're assuming you're going to have an 8% return in the market, well, that's including inflation. So you then have to back out the inflation to have a net return. And again, Projection Lab and all the software, if you're looking in today's dollars, it's going to do a net return. But you don't want to think about today's dollars, but not inflation adjusted on the return side as well.
Yeah, and you also, if you're ever doing calculations of like how much money you're going to spend in retirement, you do want to think about inflation, because you might think, oh, I'm going to use easy math, right? I spend about $100,000 a year today in my life, and I'm happy and fulfilled on that. But that amount of money in 30 years to get the same stuff for $100,000 might be, $200,000 or $150,000.
Yes, but you just want to make sure that you're keeping it apples to apples, right? So if you're thinking about today's dollars, you want to make sure your investment returns are in today's dollars. And then if you're doing it in future dollars, then your investment returns need to be future dollars as well. So just keeping them apples to apples, so your frame of reference is the same on both.
Yeah, and like you said, there's some tools, like you use Projection Lab. I just paid for a year of Bolden, new retirement, just because I want to try it out. And I kind of thought it'd be fun to try something different than what you're using, even though I realized then I can't get you to help me because you don't know that tool. But it'll be fun I want to kind of play around. But if you're using tools like that, they're going to take that into account for you, which is nice. Okay, next question is a little bit of a long one. I'm going to read it aloud to you, Andrew, because I'm pointing this towards you.
Thanks.
I have a 457B plan and love that I can access the funds before 59.5 without any penalty, but do not like that other than a rollover when I retire, my only options are a lump sum, annuity, or regular periodic payments. I thought it was more like a 401k or brokerage where I could withdraw funds as needed on a yearly or monthly basis. Do you think I should roll it over when I early retire and start a Roth conversion ladder so I'm better able to control withdrawals and maybe even avoid some RMDs, which is required minimum distributions, given that this is an account where I can invest the most and is my fastest growing account? Additional context, I have my Roth IRA and will be eligible to start receiving pension payments at 55, about $3,800 a month pre-tax. My employer also contributes to an HRA for all employees, which I can start using for reimbursements upon separation. It has $6,000 in it right now. I also have $9,000 in an HSA and plan to contribute $8,550 for 2025 and every year thereafter, for which it makes sense to me. And I'm soon to be on a high deductible health plan. Knock on wood, it is working for us now because neither of us have any unexpected medical costs outside of routine preventative care. Thanks. Love the podcast. I love how they shoved like a case study question into a Q&A. I mean, kudos, because, shoot your shot, I like it.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to try and do it in some digestible pieces. So first up, 457B plan. One, I love those. They are very similar to a deferred compensation plan. They're typically for federal or state workers, have access to 457s. They're a way to save additional funds for retirement by deferring a portion of your compensation into this account. So the fact that they have a 457B is fantastic.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So it really, I think it depends a little bit on the terms of the 457B, but what this listener has described is that they can take a lump sum, or they can get
an annuity.
An annuity or the regular periodic payments. Essentially, this should be the same thing, right? And so in general, I like to have control of the funds. And so being able to roll those into an IRA would give you a little bit more flexibility, as long as there are no penalties or things like that, right? I think it just depends a little bit on the details of your specific plan. One asterisk here that I'm sure Liz will highlight when she listens to this is that note that when you're rolling something in to an IRA, you then are subject to the pro rata rule, and then your ability to do backdoor Roth conversions is severely impacted. But it sounds like that the listener said that they already have a Roth IRA, and so they may have good Roth funds already. That may not be something to consider. Yeah, so in general, I like the idea of rolling it into an IRA, so you've got a little bit more control on the distribution of those funds. I'm a big believer in the flexibility of account diversification, and also having it within an institution like a Vanguard or a Fidelity that has good access to funds, low fees, and all that goes with it. And then when you've got it in one of those accounts in an IRA, then definitely considering then she asks about the Roth conversion ladder. Absolutely would take a look at that. The circumstances of your financial situation will determine whether a Roth conversion ladder makes sense, but it's one of those secrets of early retirement where you're going to have low income.
Yeah.
You can typically fill up your 10%, even your 12% bracket, and be able to convert those funds to Roths for very low income taxes.
And we're going to talk about Roth conversion ladders in a minute because we also got a question on that. But I will just add, first off, two things. I had a deferred compensation plan at work, or have one, and it is a, for-profit corporate version of a 457B. For just, I'm simplifying it by saying that. I had to make the choices of whether it was a lump sum, annuities, etc., what year it's paid out, when I was putting it into the fund each year. And then I could do like a one lifetime change and never touch it again, basically. And so that's really limited because you're really trying to predict the future. I would say, like, my opinion on this would be, if they already have what they would consider enough and are already going to have some pretty big RMDs from their IRA, I wouldn't sleep on the options of like lump sum or annuity, right? Like the fact that you can make the decision when you leave and your age. I mean, Greg had that choice. Greg worked for a hospital, which is technically a nonprofit, and he had the choice. He had a 457B, and when he separated, he got to choose whether he received a lump sum or an annuity over a number of years. And so he chose like 10 annual payments over the 10 years after. And his wasn't like massive. So I mean, he gets a smaller payment over the next 10 years. It's not going to like dramatically swing our income one way or another, but it's not a bad option if you already have I have a pretty healthy 401k. And so rolling more money into an IRA for me would just make my RMDs like ridiculous when I get older.
Right. Well, I think the rollover to the IRA makes sense if you are absolutely going to be doing some Roth conversions in a Roth conversion ladder, right? But if you're just rolling those IRA funds into just to have them there, then yeah, the RMD bomb will be potentially a big issue.
And the RMD bomb, by the way, is the idea that at some point, if your 401k or your IRA becomes so large, the required minimum distributions that you have to take become really big based on how the formulas work. And then you're just paying a ton of taxes then anyways. And so you want to kind of minimize the taxes and try to pay them in smaller chunks throughout your life. Okay, so the next question, speaking of taxes, is the logistics of a Roth conversion ladder in early retirement. The planning seems daunting.
Yeah, so first up, I'm going to direct the listener to the Mad Fientist, who has got a blog post on Roth conversion ladders that spells this out really well. Check out the Mad Fientist post on this. Second, tools like Projection Lab and Bolden have features where they model this, and it is really helpful because it can show the impact. Okay, if I'm going to do 10 years of Roth conversions in my 50s, right, which is very common if you're retiring in your mid 40s, or you're going to do them in your late 40s, early 50s. Okay, if I can convert $500,000 from my IRA to Roth IRAs in a conversion ladder, I'm going to do $50,000 a year for 10 years. I'm going to do $500,000, and I'm going to fill up what tax bracket at $50,000. If I have no other income, I'm going to be at a very low tax bracket. And you then compare the scenario of doing those conversions over 10 years at $50,000 a year compared to the $500,000 that would have to start coming out as part of your RMDs when you hit 72 and a half or 75, depending on your age. And so they do all that math for you, and you can see exactly, like, down to the $1,000 where it makes sense at which buckets to fill up. So I definitely encourage using software to do this. You could create your own Excel sheet and manually figure it all out, but Projection Lab does a great job with it. I've not played with Bolden yet to see how they do it. I know they do offer it, but I've not played with it. But I've definitely helped some clients in Projection Lab to model this out and see how it works.
See, I'm already regretting my choice to go with Bolden, and now I'm just like, why am I not doing Projection Lab?
I actually have an account I can give you, so.
Oh, to play around with?
Yes.
For free? You don't have to pay anything for it?
I have a coaching account with them, so I've got a couple logins. So.
Oh, that might be fun, actually. I want to go see if I can do that in New Retirement, which is called Bolden. It used to be called New Retirement. Now it's called Bolden. I want to see if I can do what you just said there, because the concept of the conversion ladder is not super complex, but the optimization of it is where things can get, I think, complex.
and I think sometimes with the Roth conversion ladder, you're still trying to predict the future. And so you kind of have to decide. You can make some educated guesses on where you think you're going to be, but ultimately it comes down to, what do we think the market is going to do? What do I think my IRA balances are going to be at retirement age when RMDs have to start getting pulled out? And what is the marginal tax rate that I'm going to be at that point in time versus the marginal tax rate that I would pay on the Roth conversions if I do them earlier? And what does that all look like? And ultimately, you're trying to minimize lifetime taxes.
Yeah, and the thing that I like to tell people to make them feel better about the risk involved in trying to, like, predict the future and forecast this stuff is, if you just got to do your best job to forecast this and take the best assumptions and information you have as of today to decide what makes sense. But let's say you miscalculate, right? And you decide, oh, I want to do I'm going to do $25,000 a year because I think that's about the amount that'll still keep me, in this tax bracket 5 years from now. And that's my best prediction. And you're wrong. And something's going on in your life 5 years from now where you're actually somehow making a bunch more money, right? At that point, because most of the risk is on you're paying too much taxes. At that point, you're making a bunch of money you weren't expecting and planning to have made. And you should just be, like, okay with the fact of, like, okay, I didn't perfectly tax optimize the situation, but I'm making a bunch of money I didn't predict I'd have at this point in my life. So
yeah, that's always the asterisk on this when it comes to RMDs, right? If you end up having an RMD bomb, it's, you gave up some upside and having to pay more taxes, but then on the flip side, your balances are so much higher and you're getting that much more money. So
there's a money bomb attached with that.
Boo-hoo
tax
you,
bomb,
right?
Yeah, right. Yes. Okay, next question. When to stop investing in your 401k if you want to retire early?
This is a good one.
This is a really good one.
You and I may have different opinions.
I know.
on this.
I'm curious that you go.
Who's going to go first?
No, I want to hear yours first. Andrew always goes first. Okay. Because then it makes me sound better. I can, like, adjust mine and be like, oh, of course, that's what I was going to say.
All right, so here's my point of view. If you are on the early retirement path and you're not going for a lean fire path, typically you would have been on the higher income side of things. And so for the higher income earner, the benefit of knocking that $19,000. What's the contribution today?
23,500 this year.
There you go. There's my. I was about to say 17, and then
Shows how long
I
it's
said
been.
19.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I looked at it. Okay, so 23,000. Because remember, when you're contributing that 23,000 to the 401k, that's the top of your rate. And so if you were paying 22, 28, even 33% on that 23,000, that's a significant tax savings. And so I lean to, and always there's an asterisk, like it depends on your actual situation, but for most people, I would lean to you should never stop contributing, because one, you're paying the high marginal tax, you're likely paying the high marginal tax rate, and two, like we've talked about, you can get access to those funds via there are different ways to access those funds before 59 and a half. Now, if you had absolutely no dollars in a brokerage account and you had no plan to do what I call the bridge, you got to have money to do the bridge years, then my answer might be a little bit different. But it's hard to argue the tax savings of not continuing to invest in the 401k.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really have much of a different answer on this, honestly. Right? I think your point about, if you really are like almost to the point of retiring early and you've maxed out your 401k all this time and you're like short on cash or something, there might be a year where you're like, I need that 23,000, whatever. I mean, definitely get your company's
actually,
match.
as I'm thinking about it, I actually talked with a coaching client a couple of months ago, and I actually in their specific situation, I recommended to not max out the 401k anymore. And the situation was they were looking to retire. They had sizable balances in their IRAs already, and they needed more of a cash cushion. So they wanted to retire in the next year, and their cash balances were low. They had plenty of retirement funds, but I was nervous about that sequence of returns risk, and so it made sense for them to back off the full four. Basically I said go up to the company match, but if you really want to retire in a year, you need significantly higher cash balances to do that. So there's an example of it depends on your situation, but for most people, and they were not in the significant, they were not a super high earner. I think their marginal tax rate may have been 18 or 22%.
And in my situation, I had a nice cash buffer that I was retiring on already.
Yep.
And I was better off, even though I arguably had too much in my IRA, more than I would need at a retirement age is when I say too much. I still wanted the tax benefit because I still, the last amount of money I earned was in a very high tax bracket. And even if it wasn't, just being in like a 20-ish% tax bracket, that 23,500, you're saving almost $5,000 in taxes. So, I mean, there's just the tax benefits are so nice. And like we said, you can later do the conversion ladder to deal with the fact that you've got too much in your IRA. So I think we'd probably say, like, I hate to put a percentage on it, but probably like 90% of the time, you don't ever want to stop investing in your 401k. And again, that example Andrew gave was someone that was like, right on the cusp of it and just needed to beef up their cash reserves. Okay. How do you project how your expenses will change as you age?
This is another tough one.
Crystal ball.
So there's the common thinking that you have the go-go years when you first retire, and then you transition into what's referred to as the slow-go years. And if you think about it, if you're retiring in your 60s, you may want to be traveling the world. You may, even if you're retiring in your 50s, you've got the utility, the health to do a lot more. If you hang out with people who are in their 80s or 90s, there's a lot less desire to do some of those things, and so there's a natural spending curve where I think it goes up for that early part of retirement and then gradually weans itself down. Now, health costs can play into that a little bit. But if you're on Medicare when you hit 65, there's some insurance there. But it's kind of hard to do to figure out exactly where you think you'll be. But history is probably a pretty good predictor here. How have you been in managing your money, and how disciplined you are when it comes to tracking your expenses, managing your spending, and are you able to stick to a budget well, and things like that.
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, I agree with everything you just said. I think you just do your best to envision what will be happening in your life. So I actually have this thing I call my life planning spreadsheet, and it's just a manual Excel sheet, but it lists out every single year until I'm like 100, and it shows Greg, my husband, and what age he'll be. It shows our parents and what age they'll be. It shows our kids and what age they'll be. And we have like the college years marked off. So we can just easily visualize what will be happening. And I can easily visualize, like when my kids are in their 30s, they might start having kids. We might be in the grandkid phase. And I can start to see like, we might never really have any down years. I'm either going to be, wanting to live my own life, help my, early adult, have my kids in college, help my early kids during their early adult years. I want to be able to travel with them. And then they're going to have grandkids. And then I think you just do your best to envision the life you have now, the life you want, and what will be happening in it given your family situation, right? Like, do you have kids? Do you not have kids?
I think those are great points.
And then have a buffer. Like I have a big buffer where I'm like, I can't predict stuff. So I'm going to add 10 to 20% to everything.
Another plug for Projection Lab. They have a great feature for doing this. You can map out, you can add, hey, between 55 and 65, I'm going to have an extra $10K a year medical costs. Or I'm going to add between 60 and 70 for 10 years, we're going to do an extra $10K of travel. Or, I know my kids are going into college and maybe I don't have 529 funds set aside for them yet, and we're going to try and cash flow.
Yeah.
Those 4 years are going to be really high. So these software packages, you can put all of that in and it helps you visualize and map things out, kind of where your spending will be versus the inflows. The Sankey diagram in
Monarch.
Projection Lab.
Oh,
Projection Lab has one just like Monarch, but it's fantastic for helping to see the inflows and the outflows on the various years.
Okay, I'm like getting more and more excited about Projection Lab here. Okay. Next question. This is one of my favorite ones, okay? So there was a reel. I actually saw this because Liz Gets Loaded posted it, who's on this podcast also. And she reposted someone else's video. And then the same person who asked this question saw the video, because when they sent me the question, I was like, wait, did we see the same video? And she was like, yeah. So it's an Instagram reel. We'll put a link in the show notes to it. But it's basically somebody giving their take of why you shouldn't invest all of your money in index funds because it's all US and it's not diversified enough internationally, and basically saying like total market US index funds is not the way to go.
So this is a great question. I think I may get some listener pushback, maybe some listener hate mail on this one from my point of view. Here are my thoughts. I'm still 100% VTSAX, and here's why. The way I think about it, I've been very consistent here that I'm only looking for the market returns. I'm not looking to beat the market, and I'm not looking to do worse than the market. And so that has always been it has been my approach for the last 15 years at this point. So when it comes to VTSAX, which is Vanguard Total Stock Market Index, is the 4,300 stocks that make up the total market, the total U.S. market. So my biggest argument against this is if you look at the stocks that make up what VTSAX is, Apple, Google, Microsoft, right, Amazon. These are all, quote, U.S. companies. Coca-Cola. They're U.S. companies, but they also all have massive international footprints. So to say that, Apple, these companies don't have any exposure to the U.S. market, Are they a Brazilian oil company? No. A Brazilian oil company is pretty much focused on the Brazilian market and the Brazilian economy, but I feel good about the international diversification I get from these companies and their exposure to the international markets. There's also, if you look at performance, and it's, past history is not going to necessarily equal future performance. VTSAX has outperformed the international markets.
Yeah, heavily.
By a pretty significant margin. Now, one of the key argument that people who advocate for being more heavily invested in international markets is that the U.S.'s best days are behind them, and that the U.S. That the international markets are going to outperform the U.S. And my response to that is I have no idea whether that is true or not. I do not have a crystal ball, and if the international markets outperform the U.S. by a significant margin, these people will be right, and I would be, quote, wrong for continuing to follow VTSAX. But I still, even with all the crazy challenges that we have in this country right now, I still believe in the U.S. and what that I don't believe that its worst, its best days are behind it.
I like what you're saying, Andrew, because it's what I'm already doing. And the thought of adjusting my strategy feels stressful. But let me also add, because I just think this is interesting, and we're part of this, to be clear, so I'm not calling out other people, but I am for a minute. So the person who put this video out is a fee-only financial planner, and she put out a reel on Instagram. And she basically said what you've been told to always, invest. If you're invested in, VTSAX, VTI, VOO, whatever.
Right.
Okay. And she says, very respectfully, this is a mistake. And then introduces herself as a financial planner. And then basically, talks about how this questionable advice made it into the core tenets of financial independence. But in the text of the post, she actually says, VTSAX has worked, I get it, but it's also invested in just one country. I haven't read the updated Simple Path to Wealth, but word on the street is that the author has revised his investment portfolio to now be global. So that's not actually entirely true. And I think it's interesting that she's like, I haven't even read it, but I'm going to comment on it. So what he actually says, J.L. Collins recently introduced an updated version of The Simple Path to Wealth, which is one of Andrew's favorite books and what he gives out as wedding presents. He still maintains his stance on primarily focusing on U.S.-based total market index funds. He does address the topic of international investing, acknowledging that it could be a valid strategy, especially for investors outside the U.S. But he still says that for those U.S. investors, he says the same point you're making, Andrew, which is they're achieving some level of international exposure through U.S.-based companies because so many large U.S. companies operate globally, right? And so he still isn't pushing for, and again, it's not to say that we need to follow what he's saying anyways. My point is people make these controversial videos where they're sort of negating someone else's advice. They're sort of referencing some advice that's not even accurate. And my point is be careful what you read on the internet. Look, be careful what you listen to in a podcast also. This is just our opinion.
Right.
And I think you said it well, Andrew, of nobody can predict this. Nobody can predict if international markets are going to outperform. Nobody can predict if this is the end of kind of U.S. being the strongest performers. But I'd also say if it makes you feel better to have some percentage of your portfolio in international stocks, cool, go do it. It's your money.
I'm not saying you shouldn't have anything in the international funds. It's just I think it's an added level of complexity that I don't need. I also think that we're also splitting hairs at this point, right? So we're not talking about investing in 5 individual stocks or 5 stocks, 10 stocks, right? We're talking about 4,300 stocks that VTSAX is invested in. The diversification you get from VTSAX, if you are trying to chase returns and have the absolute best possible return, the international markets may deliver better, but they may not. If the last 20 years they haven't, and so I think we are absolutely splitting hairs at the very end of the spectrum in terms of what's considered well diversified.
Yeah. I was just reading something. J.L. Collins actually addresses these concerns directly on a Reddit thread. Okay. Where he's essentially saying a lot of what we just said. Like he said, he goes, I've never felt the need to own an international stock fund and still don't. That said, I have no strong objection to doing so. So if you feel the need, you have my blessing. He said that perfectly.
I'm going to add one more thing.
Yeah.
So I managed an international business for the past 10 years. I've been over 50 countries. I have seen how other countries operate from a legal perspective and how they operate within corporate law and things like that. The U.S. corporate law system is still the very best in the world. And so I have confidence, like trying to do business in some of these countries, it was a nightmare. And a lot of it was around, trademark law and company law and things like that, and contract law. How strong are the contracts? How are they enforceable? Corruption, things like that. Nothing, accounting standards, right? Nothing touches that U.S. infrastructure. And so that's also gives me a lot of confidence in the ability for the U.S. to still maintain a fairly dominant position when it comes to the markets.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, next question. What do you do with a sizable cash amount? Put it all in the market? Which ETF? First off, Liz and I did an episode. It was episode number 111 called How to Handle a Windfall, Protect Your Future Fortune. And we talk through in much more detail than we're going to be able to do today. But Andrew, what would you do if you just got a sizable cash bonus or whatever?
Yeah, this is where the behavior of personal finance really comes into play, because it is very difficult to do what is actually the best thing. The best thing, if you were to back test this, remember, time in the market beats timing the market. And so the more time you have in the market for every single dollar is overall better. And because of that, the best strategy is you should be dumping all of that. If you get a $100,000 windfall, you should be dumping all of it the very next day into the market. That is what the math says. I have personally struggled with this approach, and I have not followed that. And if you look at the experts and you look at the math, you would say, I have given up some returns because of that strategy. I am okay with that. I have taken a more conservative approach. And typically when there have been either bonuses or there have been any types of windfalls where I've had additional cash come in, I have dollar costed it into the market. And so I have taken a more conservative approach, and I'm okay with that. But it's very hard to not think about timing the market when you have basically when you've got that sizable cash balance. You're like, I'm just waiting for the market to fall, waiting for the market to fall. And I know
I've been
Maggie,
waiting for years.
Maggie, I know you've struggled with this. You've been waiting for years, and this is where the behavior. I encourage everyone to read Morgan Housel's books, because this is where the psychology really plays into it. But if you look at the market return, it's up and to the right. And so,
long-term,
yes,
right,
yeah. If you zoom out, it's up and to the right. And there have been plenty of times where there have been big dips, and you can get lucky by timing the market. I really emphasize the luck there. There is no skill in timing the market. It is all luck. And yes, you can quote make some money by trying the market, but ultimately the best thing to do from a math perspective is to dump it all in. However, if it makes you sleep better at night, which it does for me, I have taken the approach of dollar cost averaging it. Now,
which means you're putting in small chunks.
I'm putting in small chunks, right? So if I had $100,000 to invest in the market, I would potentially put in $10,000 each month over the next 10 months to dollar cost it out, to reduce that risk of a potential market drop.
And a middle ground too, that's like, if you like you said, you're stuck in your head about it, like Andrew is, and like I have too, is take that $100,000, you put in 10,000 a week, because then you're shortening the amount of time you're getting it all in faster, which is an option too. The only other thing I would say here is I do think you want to like look at the rest of your financial situation, which we talk about in episode 111. So go listen to that if you really want more details on this. But you need to make sure you like already have a strong emergency fund in place. Like make sure you've done some of the other basic things financially. And then, I would dump the rest of it in a market. And they say which ETF. We've done entire episodes about which index funds we each own. And so I'll more point you to that. But like you just said, Andrew, you got most of your money in VTSAX. I have most of my money in VTI, which is only because that's what I can buy through Fidelity. They're very similar funds.
And I will have a decision to make in February of next year when I receive a DCP lump sum payment, and I'll have to make that exact decision that we're talking about, whether I decide to put it all in the market or I decide to, hey, we're going to use that, we're going to keep it in cash, and we're just going to use that for, quote, our bridge account for the bridge years.
I'm excited to see what you do while I still sit on some cash and don't put it all in the market. Okay. Next question. Decent income, but not investing besides 401k. What should we do next?
So first thing, pay off all the debts. Make sure you're debt free except for the mortgage is kind of typically my go-to. And then the next order of operations is to do the Roth IRAs if you're below the income limit. And then, and I'm assuming this person is, and maybe bad assumption, they should absolutely be investing the 401k up to the company match if their company offers a company match.
Yeah,
right?
Some people think they're like, oh yeah, I'm maxing out my 401k, but they're maxing the company match, which is like 4%, 6%, 8%. They're not putting in the full amount of what is legally allowable by the IRS, which is $23,500 this year.
Right. Yeah. So I actually will go. I'll go 401k company match before anything. It's usually a couple percentage points. It's small. You should absolutely be doing that. Then you pay off all the debts except for the mortgage. Then you go to the Roth accounts. Then you come back to the 401k and keep increasing it until you hit up to the maxes. And then once you're maxing the 401k, then you start working on the mortgage. And, whether you want to go really aggressive on the mortgage or you want to kind of do a split and you kind of put 50% against the mortgage and then you put 50% into a brokerage account, so you start investing that way. That's a personal decision. We went aggressive on the mortgage and then turned to the brokerage account, but I'm perfectly fine with people going with a more 50-50 approach to, hey, we're going to put money in the brokerage and put money against the mortgage as a good approach.
And we did a whole episode with you and I, Andrew, it was a long time ago, episode 33, which was step-by-step path to grow wealth. It was the investment walk, which is your term.
Yes,
and it goes through this stuff step-by-step in more detail. So I would encourage you to
As we've done more
that.
and more episodes, Maggie, I've kind of like forgotten some of the ones
I know.
that we've done. It's, it's good that
I'll sort of remember
them.
and I'm like, we've definitely done a whole episode where we've talked about this.
That's right. That was based off of my blog. I had a blog post on it, right? Yeah.
And so I'll put a link in the show notes to that episode and Andrew's blog post in case you prefer to read it. Okay, next question. How do you keep track of your HSA reimbursements? And for people who want some background on this, Liz and I did a whole episode on HSAs. So if you don't fully understand how HSAs work, we're not going to get into that today, but go back and listen to that episode. But I just keep all of my receipts in a Google Drive folder. Every time I get a receipt from me or one of my kids from the doctor, braces, whatever, bills, I scan it in, I put it in the same Google Drive folder. It's called HSA receipts. And eventually I'm going to make a Google spreadsheet where I have them all organized and written out. But right now I just dump them all in there. Mm-hmm. And I've got probably at least 30, 40 grand worth of receipts in a folder that I know at any point I can request from my HSA. And it's all self-reported too. So when you get money out of your HSA, you have to do some stuff, and then it's all essentially on the honor system. And if you get audited, you better have all those receipts ready.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate that we haven't had a lot of healthcare expenses, but my daughter's braces was kind of the big one that we just got that I will be, I actually have already saved that receipt. Similar to you, I put it in my Microsoft account, and I've got a folder where I store everything, and I also was thinking about creating a kind of a running spreadsheet, so I've got the total amounts.
That's been on my backlog for like 5 years, but eventually I will. Okay, what strategies should I be aware of to begin my required minimum distributions next year?
So, one, make sure you're doing the calculation correctly. There's a very specific calculation you got to get right. There are huge penalties associated with not taking those required minimum distributions.
Won't your bank or your brokerage like help you do them too?
It depends on your brokerage, but remember, if you don't have all of your accounts in the same brokerage or things like that, then that can be a problem. So yeah, you got to pay very close attention to the actual amounts that are required.
And do you just suggest people use like an online RMD calculator?
Yes. Oh, I mean, the IRS it's actually it's a pretty easy calculation. Like they publish the percentages based off of your age of what you have to take. But basically it's the total amount of all IRA assets regardless of where they live.
Okay. And like I have all my IRA assets in one brokerage, and I just noticed Fidelity has a RMD calculator.
Okay.
And it even says this will be easy then. We've already done the math for you. See how much you need to take from your Fidelity accounts this year. So that's not all of them may do that, but it's nice that many of them will do that. Again, to your point, that is only helpful if you have all your money in one place.
Right.
Also, keep in mind, Andrew and I are not yet of retirement age.
Correct.
So all of this is stuff we've read about and learned about. We've never actually done it.
I actually helped a
ourselves.
client a couple months ago.
I take that back.
I
help
helped
my mom sometimes.
I helped a client last year through this and helped her with. Luckily, she was on Vanguard, and it's pretty. You just have to set the settings on Vanguard by the account, and then you actually specify kind of which. That's why it's called Spec ID. There's an ID associated with the purchases that you made, and so this client was wanting to minimize capital gains, and so we were selling her most recent purchases in order to minimize capital gains as much as possible. And that strategy works whether you're doing RMD or this client was not. It was not a required minimum distribution, but it was actually just from a regular brokerage account. But the same thing applies for whether it's a brokerage account or RMD.
Okay, a few final questions. These are quick ones. One was for me. Was your Iceland trip worth how expensive it was? I think I put on our mid-year expense review that was about a $10,000 trip for 5 people for 2 weeks. That actually isn't that far off other trips we've taken for that length of time. So I think for us it was, we could afford to go on that trip without going into debt. And so, and we all had fun, and we made some great core memories with our kids, and we had a good time. Even during the bad times and the bad weather, like we had fun, and we, came together and commiserated, and food was expensive, and we laughed about that, and then enjoyed how cheap things were when we got home. But yeah, it was worth it to us, but we also could afford it. It would not be worth it to me if I was going into debt for a trip like that. I would just go somewhere else I could afford to go. Okay, this is a fun one. What is the number one skill you developed that helped you develop people?
I love this question.
Yeah.
This is a good one.
It was a good one. You go first, Andrew.
So for me, it's being a good listener and asking questions to get people to the right answer versus telling them what the answer is. So helping them kind of come along for the journey.
Mine, I haven't given this as much thought as I should have given how long I've known about this question, but because I think there's so many skills you need to help you develop people well. And so it's hard to narrow it down to one, but I would probably say humility, right? And I would double click on that to say, right, being able to kind of be authentic and admit when you're wrong. And, I would do things, and there's times where I was like, you know what, this didn't work, or that didn't land well with you guys. And I learned from that, and thanks for the feedback. And I would ask for feedback a lot, which was a big thing. And I would ask, I think Andrew's point about being a good listener is important, but I would sometimes ask people, how they wanted to be managed. I had a whole intake sheet I would do, like an intake process I would do with new people that were reporting to me, where we would learn about each other. And I think that was really helpful to like understand, like, not everybody wants to be managed the same way and responds to the same thing. And so I'm combining a lot of things because it's hard for me to do one, but that's some quick thoughts. Okay, final question. What are your thoughts on the book, The 5 Types of Wealth? Have you read it yet, Andrew?
I haven't.
Okay. It is really good. I have read it, and I will say it's probably an injustice that I did not mention it on our favorite episode. We did an episode recently where we did like our favorite books and podcasts and stuff, and we all went a little like older school of things that we had read, like I think earlier in our lives. But I actually was going back to my notepad file of all the notes I wrote while I read the book, which I thought it was a fantastic book. Liz and I sometimes joke I don't love the design, the actual like visual design of the cover, so that throws me off sometimes. But the book itself, and Sahil Bloom, who wrote it, I think he's a fantastic writer, and just the way he thinks and shares his thoughts are great. I wrote down, my first note on that book was, wish I had read more books like this earlier in my career. Because I didn't have a lot of the like balance of, I mean, he talks about these 5 types of wealth.
Yeah, so the 5 are time wealth, social wealth, mental wealth, physical wealth, and financial wealth.
Yeah.
So I gotta, that sounds interesting. I gotta dig into that.
Yeah, it's a very good book, and it, you know, it combines a lot of different things that you've heard of and read before, but it does put it into, you know, it is a very like empowering, thoughtful book. And it's the sort of book where like, I think it'd be a great book for somebody to read right out of college. And I say right out of college or like in college, because I'm not sure, like, I think if I gave it to my high schooler to read, like, I think it's a little too much right now for them. But again, my biggest comment for it is, wish I'd read more books like this earlier in my life. And so I think it's a great book. Highly recommend it. We'll put a link in the show notes to it.
I just read a summary on the Reddit, the 5 types of wealth, about the time wealth, social wealth. It's interesting.
It's a good book.
Yeah, it looks
yeah.
good.
I mean, it's one of those books where like I feel like I've tapped into a lot of these things already, but through a level of like maturity and wisdom I have now that I did not have in my 20s. And that's why I say like I wish I had read this stuff more often. Okay, well, thank you guys. Thanks to everybody who submitted a question to us, and thank you, Andrew, for joining and answering questions too. We always appreciate you guys spending some time with us. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can always leave us a written review on Apple Podcast or a rating on Spotify. We always really appreciate it.
We also encourage you to share this episode with a friend or family member to encourage ongoing discussions about money. You can also subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you, and maybe we'll compile those into another listener Q&A episode like this. You can text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Maggie.
Bye.
Bye.
We're going